Hello. So in today's lesson, we are looking at what are stone keep castles. We've got two learning objectives today. We're going to try to understand why castles changed over a period of time, and also to understand the functions of some parts of a stone keep castle. Now, you've got a quiz to complete in Google Classroom at the end of this lesson today. Any questions you might have, feel free to contact me, gbrown@stopsleyhighschool.co.uk, or you can also contact your teacher as well. Starting task then, we looked at 6 different parts of a Motte and Bailey castle last lesson. How many of those do you remember? Pause the video here and see if you can list them down. Okay, so those 6 different parts were the motte, the bailey, the keep, the palisades, the moat and the drawbridge. Now, if you didn't play the video lesson last lesson, then actually you might have done something slightly different, but you should still be familiar of what a Motte and Bailey castle looks like. These were the first castles in England at the time, led by William the Conqueror once he had invaded. But today's lesson is going to look at how castles slowly started to change over time, because these were quick castles to build. They could be built in just 10 days, but they had their problems, and a better structure was needed, a better building. So, over time, castles changed in design. More complicated buildings were made, so for example, stone instead of woods. Now, this means that whereas the Motte and Bailey castle over time has rotted away, so we only got a rough outline of where it would have been today, there's still a range of stone keep castles that could be seen across the UK today, as this map shows. Wales has more stone keep castles per square mile than any other country in the world. So, stone castles were more expensive and they would take a long time to build. You had to plan the area, you had to gather the material like the stone, and it took a while to build. So, for example, a Scarborough castle took about 10 years to build. So, what would you expect to see in the average stone keep castle? Well, the first part we're going to look at is the keep. Now, this remains from Motte and Bailey castles, but it was now made out of stone. Now, this was the most secure and the strongest part of the castle. It meant if you were under attack, you would hide there. You'd also hold your valuables there, and it would be used as living quarters for the most important people in the castle. Now, the keep had many different rooms in, such as bedrooms, kitchens, and even chapels, places for praying. Obviously, the size of these rooms depended on the size of the keep. Now, larger castles would take longer to build, but they would be worth it in the long run. And you can find keeps of different sizes all across the UK. The keep would also have a toilet in it known as the privy. Now, this is where people would go to the toilet, and then that sewage waste would lead out into the moat surrounding the castle. The next part we're going to look at is the curtain wall. Now, Motte and Bailey castles used to have a wooden fence built around the outside, a bit like this. This was known as the palisade. But obviously, this wasn't particularly strong, and whilst it offered some protection to Motte and Bailey castles, stone castles needed something a bit more secure. And so stone castles, as you would imagine, had stone walls around the outside instead. These were much tougher to break down if you were an army trying to attack, and these would range from about 6 to 20 feet thick, and they'd be about 50 feet high. And these helped show the wealth and the power of the individual who owned the castle, because it's a status thing. The fact that you can own a wall that is 6 to 20 feet thick or up to 50 feet high shows how powerful you are, how much money you've got to spend on this building, and it would be seen for miles around. It was a real status of power. Along your curtain wall, you would have ramparts on the top, as you can see here. These were where you could walk, so guards could now patrol the walls to look for enemy attackers. The height of the castle would mean you could see potential attackers coming from a great distance, and therefore plan to keep people safe. You'd also have arrow slits in the wall as well. This would allow archers to fire at their enemies whilst being protected themselves. The next part, stone towers. So these tall stone towers, like you can see here in this picture, could often be found built into the curtain walls. They'd be a number of shapes and designs, they'd be very tall, and they'd have arrow slits in. again to help defend the castle from being attacked. If you imagine if you're an archer, the stone towers give you height, and you've got these little gaps, the arrow slits, where you can fire your arrows and pick off enemies. Sort of similar to a sniper today. The gatehouse. So this was the entrance to the castle, and it would be heavily guarded. The walls would be at their thickest here. And a common site for the gatehouse would be a drawbridge as well. That would be raised if someone was coming to attack, which would make attacking the entrance just that much harder. And it would sometimes be a bridge across the moat that would be surrounding the castle as well. Now, you would see at least one portcullis as well, a heavily grilled door that would drop down to protect the entrance and make it harder for potential attackers. So here's a quick question. Where might you find a portcullis in your house right now? Well done if you said on a penny, because that's the image you have got there on the back, on the tail side of the 1 penny piece. You'd also have in the gatehouse, as well as arrow slits for defence that we've seen already, murder holes in the ceiling. Now, these were holes pictured here where items could be thrown onto attackers. So if they started to make their way into the gatehouse, and they were trying to break through the portcullis, people would climb on top and they would drop objects down onto attackers. Things such as rocks, arrows, hot tar, boiling water. Even sometimes hot sand as well, because this would get in the armour of the attackers. Moving on, and 2 more parts we're going to look at, very similar, and the first one is the dungeons. Now these were small dark rooms, usually kept underground with the castle, used to house prisoners. If you were a prisoner here, you were in trouble. Food was scarce for you, there was not a lot of food at all, and that's if you were fed. And often people were chained to the wall and they would be tortured as well in the dungeons. The only place worse than that in a castle, I'd argue, is the oubliette. Now this was a type of dungeon. Usually it would be a circular hole in the ground with a grid on top. And you can see in the pictures they're both perspectives. We can see outside the oubliette and what it would have been like inside the oubliette for the prisoner. Prisoners were thrown in here and just basically left to die. Sewage would be thrown down here as well, and often rats would eat the remains of the prisoners, sometimes whilst they were still alive. And that concludes this short look at what is a Stone Keep castle and the different parts to it. And we'll look at these in a bit more detail in the next few lessons. Like I said at the start, you've got a quiz to complete now, multiple choice, good luck with that. Make sure you read the questions carefully. You'll find that in Google Classrooms. Any questions you've got, gbrown@stopseyhighschool.co.uk. And all that remains for me to say is thank you very much as always for completing today's lesson. Please look after yourself, get some fresh air and exercise where you can, and I'll see you soon. All the best, take care, bye bye.